up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, Germany wins its fourth World Cup after beating Argentina 1-0 in the final, with Mario Gotze scoring the winner in extra time. With Pyongyang making conciliatory gestures on one hand and test-firing missiles on the other, North Korea experts in the U.S. are urging Washington to seek new ways to restart talks with the North. Plus, despite international calls for a ceasefire, Israel vows to step up attacks on northern Gaza, forcing thousands of Palestinians to flee the area. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's new Monday, July 14th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime is in Brazil. Now, after close to a month of some of the most exciting football the world has ever seen, really, we have new World Cup champions, Germany.
The European team were crowned World Cup winners for the fourth time with a 1-0 extra time victory against Argentina in the final. SJ Lee has the details.
As many fans and pundits predicted, it was an exciting match to close out the 2014 Brazil World Cup. With the match going the full 90 minutes without a single goal scored, the match went into extra time, still looking for a clear winner. It wasn't until the 113th minute when Mario Gotze scored a brilliant goal, giving Germany the 1-0 lead and the win. For Germany, this marks their fourth World Cup win, but first as a unified nation, as the team have only won as West Germany in the past. For Argentina's Lionel Messi, who shanked his final chance at an equalizer, he was still able to win the Golden Ball award, given to the best player in the tournament. As expected, German goalkeeper Manuel Neuer claimed the Golden Glove award for the top goalkeeper in the tournament. Colombia's James Rodriguez takes home the Golden Boot award with 6 goals in total. And now that the 2014 Brazil World Cup has ended, the baton is passed over to Russia, who will host the 2018 World Cup. SJ Lee, Arirang News.
North Korea has been sending mixed signals lately, proposing to mend inter-Korean ties and then going ahead with a string of missile launches. But as the North improves its missile development capabilities, analysts in the U.S. have begun to wonder whether engaging in dialogue could be a better option for Washington than its current policy. Hwang Seong-hee reports.
North Korea fired more missiles over the weekend, marking its 14th launch of projectiles this year. 3 rounds of missiles were fired in July alone, all from different locations. The latest launch took place just 20 kilometers away from the military demarcation line dividing the two Koreas. As Pyongyang appears to be making strides with its missile development capabilities, North Korea watchers in Washington seem to be in favor of the U.S. engaging in dialogue with the regime. In a recent column in the U.S. journal National Interest, former U.S. State Department official Robert Einhorn criticized the Obama administration's strategic patience policy and said engagement could reduce the likelihood of dangerous North Korean provocations. The calls for dialogue have been echoed by other experts in the field, including Frank Januzzi, former Asia policy advisor for the Obama camp in 2008, and former U.S. nuclear negotiator Stephen Bosworth. Meanwhile, amid the string of military provocations across the border, Seoul will meet its northern neighbor for talks this Thursday. North Korea said it would send a cheering squad to the upcoming Asian Games in South Korea, and the two sides have agreed to hold working-level talks this week to discuss the details of the trip. Experts say the meeting could go beyond the scope of the sporting event, but add that the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington that start this Wednesday remain a hurdle to better inter-Korean ties. Hwang Seong-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye's long-awaited Inter-Korean Committee on Preparing for Reunification will launch on Tuesday. During a meeting with her senior secretaries today, President Park said the committee will discuss ways to boost public interest on reunification and ways to get ready for the process. The 70-member committee, headed by the president herself, was scheduled to be launched in April, but was delayed due to the deadly ferry accident that month. On the domestic economy, the president called on her new cabinet set to launch this week to swiftly announce the government's economic policy direction for the second half of the year, to push forward with her 3-year innovation plan, and to check on her drive for a creative economy. President Park also urged the National Assembly to cooperate in passing a series of pending bills aimed at revitalizing the economy. The ruling Saenuri Party will elect a new chairperson and 4 Supreme Council members at a party convention today, and President Park Geun-hye is scheduled to deliver a keynote address there. The 2 front-runners for the party's top spot are Seo Chung-won, a 7-term lawmaker and confidant of President Park, and Kim Moo-sung, a 5-term lawmaker who once led the pro-Park faction but now represents a non-pro-Park faction. The results, which will be determined by a combination of votes cast by some 200,000 party members and a public opinion poll, are expected to affect the Saenuri Party's relations with the presidential office. The votes will make up 70% of the result, and the poll will count for the remaining 30%.
China has released its 11th set of confessions from Japanese war criminals. In the latest confession, a former Japanese soldier admits to killing well over 800 Chinese, many in deeply degrading ways. Now, just a word of warning, some of the images contained in this report by Sun Jung-in are disturbing, and viewer discretion is advised.
China's State Archives Administration posted a confession of Keiji Saganaka on Sunday in its latest move to expose Japan's war crimes on the international stage. In his written confession, Keiji admitted killing 831 Chinese while he was in command from April 1937 to September 1945. The victims included 434 civilians, 98 militiamen, 252 soldiers of the 8th Route Army, 38 anti-Japanese soldiers of other armies, and 9 prisoners of war. His methods of killing were especially brutal: shooting, stabbing, beheading, burning, and starving. He confessed to killing a soldier by dissecting him while he was still alive and burying 30 civilians waist-high before shooting them. Keiji was also responsible for the enslavement of thousands of Chinese civilians who were captured and used for forced labor. He also admitted to raping more than 30 Chinese women and using poison gas on the battlefield. This is only the beginning of China's publication of confessions of 45 Japanese war criminals. China wants to highlight Japan's wartime atrocities amid disputes with the country over history and territory. The document has also been translated into English, reflecting China's efforts to reach Western audiences. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now to some very welcome news on the trade front for Korea, because local companies landed almost $34 billion in overseas plant construction orders in the first half of this year. That's a staggering 20% jump from the same period last year. Na Hyung-kyung reports.
Most of the orders have come from the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy says more than 50% of all orders were from Middle Eastern countries, including Kuwait and Iraq. African nations, including Algeria, also bumped up their orders compared to the first half of last year, but Asian and European countries reduced their orders, having fewer projects and plans to build industrial facilities. The total number of orders is worth $33.7 billion, nearly half of government's target of $70 billion for 2014. Experts say Korean firms opting to form consortiums instead of competing against each other was key to their winning bids in overseas markets. With the global economy expected to improve and emerging countries continuing to expand their industrial infrastructure, officials say the outlook for Korean construction companies in the latter half of the year does not look too grim. But with the lingering political uncertainties in the Middle East, insiders warn that it may not be too long before the orders stop coming in. They also point to a decrease in orders for offshore oil plants as Korea's 3 biggest shipbuilders struggle to ward off competition from China. The shale gas boom in North America is another factor, and observers say if the slump continues, Korean shipbuilders should quickly shift their focus to merchant vessels like tankers and LPG carriers, as more orders are expected to come out from Europe. 나현경, Arirang News.
And it isn't just construction orders doing extremely well, because Korea logged record auto part exports in the first half of this year. This mostly backed by record shipments of automobiles themselves to overseas markets. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says auto parts shipments amounted to $13.5 billion in the January to June period. That's up more than 5% from the same period last year. Officials attribute the solid figures to record auto exports of more than $25.5 billion in the first half of 2014. There's also increasing demand for auto parts that are used in after-sales service and also providing parts to foreign car manufacturers such as BMW and Chrysler. The ministry adds that it expects auto and auto part exports to continue rising in the second half of the year.
Korea and China are holding a new round of free trade negotiations on this Monday in Korea's southeastern city of Daegu. The working-level talks that will last for 5 days are the first since the leaders of the two countries agreed during their summit talks in Seoul earlier this month to conclude a free trade agreement within this year. In this 12th round of talks, Korean officials will push China to open its market for industrial goods such as steel, machinery, and automobiles. Chinese trade officials are expected to ask Korea to do the same for its agricultural and marine goods. So far, the countries have agreed to liberalize their markets for about 90% of the 12,000 products traded between them, but have hit a stumbling block over which products should be excluded. Seoul says it doesn't plan to yield to Beijing's demands to fully open its agricultural and marine goods just yet. Now, while big data has been hailed in the business sector as the next big trend IT powerhouse, Korea has been slow on the uptake. A recent survey by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry on 500 local companies shows over 80% of them said they don't use big data. Only 7.5% said they do, mostly in the areas of marketing, management, and customer service. The firms that said they don't use big data attributed the reasons to inexperience and lack of expertise in data analysis, followed by a lack of funds and concerns about privacy and security. Industry insiders say to keep up with the latest in big data utilization, Korea needs to relax regulations governing the collection and use of personal information. High levels of inequality hurt the income growth of the poor but help the rich. It may seem like common sense, but a new report by the World Bank Development and Research Group lays out new evidence for the phenomenon. The report says as wealth polarization increases, the income growth rate slows among the lower class and speeds up among the upper class. The report is based on U.S. Census data from 1960 to 2010 and examines the correlation of income growth among different income levels. Although inequality can have a positive effect on growth, the report says the benefits of growth are exclusively reserved for the top end of the income distribution scale. It found that inequality has a negative impact on growth for the lower 25% of the income bracket and a positive effect on the top 25%.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Monday afternoon.
So, Eunice, thousands of Palestinians are fleeing from their homes in Gaza after Israel warned of more air and even ground attacks.
That's right, Jinju. The weekend saw the first ground attack by Israeli troops. This despite a statement issued by the UN Security Council Saturday that called for a ceasefire and peace talks. Song Ji-sun has this story.
Ignoring international appeals for a ceasefire, Israel on Sunday widened its range of Gaza bombing targets to civilian institutions with suspected Hamas ties and deployed ground troops inside Gaza. This marks the first time Israeli ground troops have entered Gaza in the current offensive. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing northern parts of Gaza after Israel warned it was targeting the area in its campaign to stop rocket attacks. A ground war seems likely, with at least 20,000 reservists having been mobilized. Israeli forces raided a suspected rocket launching site in Gaza on Sunday, with 6 Palestinians reportedly injured during the attack. Israel says it's targeting Hamas militants and terror sites, but the United Nations estimates 8 out of 10 of those killed in Gaza have been civilians. At least 160 Palestinians have been killed so far, with the Palestinian president calling on the international community to protect Gaza. Despite intensified Israeli military action, Hamas continues to launch rockets into Israel. 송지선, Arirang News.
The U.S. and Germany remain great friends, claimed America's top diplomat, despite a spying scandal that had Berlin expel a CIA station chief last week. Standing alongside his German counterpart in Vienna Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry underlined the strategic nature of their relationship and said bilateral cooperation will continue. The German foreign minister said despite some recent hardships, the two partners will work on reviving, quote, necessary and essential relations on the basis of trust and mutual respect. The two foreign ministers are in the Austrian capital for nuclear talks with Iran. Their meeting was a first since Germany discovered 2 spies within their ranks suspected of passing on intelligence to the U.S. Pope Francis has said reliable data showed about 2% of Catholic clergy are pedophiles. The Italian newspaper La Repubblica reports the Pope said priests, bishops, and cardinals were among that 2%, which represents some 8,000 individuals. During the interview with the paper's owner, the pontiff likened the abuse of children to a leprosy infecting the church, a state of affairs he found intolerable and promised would be confronted with the severity it demands. The Vatican, while commending the paper for capturing the sense and spirit of the conversation, added Pope Francis was not quoted exactly. And in about an hour's time, an operation to refloat the shipwrecked Costa Concordia will be underway to tow it away for scrapping. The luxury liner had run aground more than 2 years ago off the Tuscan island of Giglio, taking with it 32 lives. The delicate operation, if successful, would be an engineering feat. Salvage teams will try to move the still 2/3 submerged ship off a resting platform without cracking open the hull and unloading its aged contents into the open sea. The official overseeing the operation said the search for the last unrecovered body, that of an Indian waiter, will resume once the huge 100,000-ton cruise liner is at sea.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Ju.
I'm Ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11. Now, the proportion of young people here in Korea has dropped to its lowest level ever, mainly in part to the very low birth rate. And most of young people here in Korea are not at all happy with the much lauded education system. Our Connie Kim takes a look at the current situation facing the country's young people.
1 in 5 Koreans is young, a reference to people between the ages of 9 and 24 as defined by Korean law. The youth population in Korea has been on the decline since it peaked at 37% in the late 1970s, and it dropped to its lowest level this year, according to recent data by Statistics Korea. What's more worrisome is that the rate is expected to fall even further to 16% in 2020 and to only 11% in 2060. However, despite the declining youth population, competition among students for grades and spots at elite schools still remains high. The data showed that nearly 70% of Korean primary and secondary school students are dependent on private education to supplement their school classes. By age, elementary school students receive the most additional tutoring at more than 80%, followed by middle and high school students. Perhaps this is the reason why far less than half of secondary school students feel satisfied with their school life. They find relationships with classmates as some of the positive factors at school, but most of them said they're displeased with the current education system. Another sad statistic is that 10 years ago, the biggest cause of death among young people was car accidents. Now, it's suicide. According to the report, 1 in 10 young Koreans said they have actually thought about committing suicide, with the main reasons being school grades, family troubles, and financial problems. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is usually drenched with monsoon rain at this time of year, but the peninsula has been pretty dry so far this summer. The monsoon season usually begins in late June, but got started later than usual this year, on July 2nd, in fact, in the central region. Rainstorms, including those riding on the back of the recent typhoon Nogori, have only grazed the southern island of Jeju, resulting in a shortage of rainfall on the peninsula. The Korean Meteorological Administration blames the lack of rain on weaker than normal atmospheric pressure from the North Pacific, but forecasts that we'll see rain in the southern part of the country at least this week, along with sporadic showers followed by the scorching summer heat in the central region. And as I just mentioned, we're about to enter the hottest part of the year here in Korea, and temperatures are already regularly soaring well past 30 degrees Celsius during the afternoon. This kind of heat mixed with high humidity leaves many people happy to retreat into the cool of their air-conditioned office. But as our Paul Lee reports, not everyone has that luxury.
This molten metal has been heated to over 1400 degrees Celsius, and it's being poured into a mold to make a Korean traditional cauldron, or kamosot. It takes 4 strong men and hours in the melting heat to make the pots, and the craftsmen put in their very best to make the finest ones, sometimes forgetting they are covered in sweat.
People who are just resting outside say it's hot, so imagine how hot we must feel making the cauldrons. But we're not complaining. We dedicate all of our efforts to doing the best job.
The dry cleaners is another hot place to work. Small shops like this one, filled with racks of clothing, irons, and all kinds of cleaning machines, run without a break, making the place hot and steamy. But the owner has no time to think about how hot it is. He's too focused on his customers who are waiting for their clean garments.
I have done this work for many years, so I don't realize how hot it can get. I just think this is part of my work and keep on doing my job.
In a different summer scene, these people are fighting against frosty temperatures in an icy factory. They can't waste any time while transporting the ice if they want to keep it frozen solid. Some may envy them because they are working in a cool icebox during the hot season, but the work is no less demanding.
I feel most proud when I see people quenching their thirst with a cup of ice water in the hot weather.
The next time the heat starts to sap your energy, you may want to remember all the people who have to work in rough conditions, no matter how hot it is outside. You can even give them an extra nod of thanks the next time you're in need of their services. Paul Lee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Well, we're expecting another scorching day today, and temperatures will be 3 to 4 degrees higher than yesterday, hovering in the low to mid 30s across the regions. Excuse me, and the northern part of Gyeonggi-do province could receive sporadic showers during the day, and the thick fog we had this morning is gradually burning off. And once all the fog clears out, the sun will be shining down on us throughout the day, and the UV level will be quite high in most regions, so be sure to protect yourself from the sun. And as Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, monsoon season has begun, but it's been a while since we've had any monsoon rain. But a monsoonal front is expected to move northward this week, dropping showers on the southern coast tomorrow and expanding nationwide on Thursday. So please do keep that in mind. And here are the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 32, while Daegu and Gwangju will have a highs of 34 and 31, and Busan should make it to 29 this afternoon. And for other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 27 and 31, and Dokdo will reach 29. Well, that's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Okay, well, those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.